Let me tell you about the moment I stopped being a neighbor and started being a legend. It began with a cone. Not a polite one, not a helpful, wet cement kind of cone. No, this one was orange, cracked, and mean-looking, like it had a grudge. It was sitting right in front of my driveway one crisp Tuesday morning, mocking me. I stared at it while sipping my coffee, still in my robe, wondering if I was hallucinating. Maybe the HOA had started parking cones in front of driveways as a decorative deterrent, like those absurd bylaws about lawn gnome height or mailbox gloss levels. But it wasn't just a cone. It was the first strike in an all-out war. The war was waged by Karen, HOA President, self-proclaimed property guardian, and dictator of the cul-de-sac. She had weaponized pettiness into an art form. And me? I was her canvas. It started when I moved into the community 6 months ago. I should have known better. The realtor warned me about the highly involved HOA. But I was lured by the price, the view of the mountains, and the workshop garage I could finally call mine. I'm a retired engineer with time on my hands and a deep love of doing things my way. That never sat well with Karen. She complained about my flagpole and a threat to uniform curb aesthetics, fined me for painting my garage door matte black, intimidating, and once left a citation for leaving my trash bins out 10 minutes past pickup time. I gritted my teeth through all of it until she crossed the line. That Tuesday, I found a hand-delivered notice taped to my front door. HOA letterhead, bold font, smug tone. It said my driveway was non-compliant with the new neighborhood easement realignment and would be temporarily blocked until I agreed to reroute it at my own expense to preserve visual symmetry with the adjacent properties. In plain English, Karen didn't like where my driveway was and decided it was hers to redesign. That cone in front of it, a warning shot. Later that afternoon, 2 rental vehicles, not even city trucks, showed up and dumped gravel across the entry, then installed 3 more cones and a laminated access restricted, pending review sign. Karen stood on the sidewalk with her arms folded like she just captured a criminal. I didn't yell, didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her, nodded, and walked back into the house. See, the thing about engineers is we don't rant, we calculate. That night, I opened up my old design software, popped a Mountain Dew, and began what I called Operation Drawbridge. I spent days reading the HOA bylaws, every single page. And wouldn't you know it, nowhere did it say I couldn't dig on my property line. Nowhere did it prohibit installing historical or artistic landscaping structures, nor did it define what constituted a driveway enhancement. So I went legal, clean, precise. First, I called in an excavation company, told them I wanted to build a koi moat for decorative meditation purposes. They blinked. I paid in cash. In less than 48 hours, my front yard became a construction zone. Neighbors watched from behind curtains, mouths agape as machinery rolled in. Karen stormed over, squawking something about permits. "Private property," I said calmly, holding up my papers, "and here's my city permit for aquatic landscaping. Would you like a copy?" She didn't take the paper. She took pictures. Lots of them. But it was too late. By Friday, there was a 6-foot deep trench around my entire driveway, a literal moat, lined with stone, complete with a small pump for water circulation. But the pièce de résistance? I had a custom-built wooden drawbridge brought in on a flatbed. It was beautiful. Oak planks, iron hinges, motorized lift system. Karen showed up as they installed it. Her face was a mix of rage and disbelief. I half expected her to short circuit. "You're turning this place into a circus," she shrieked. "You can't just build medieval nonsense." "Actually," I said, lowering the bridge with a soft whirring motor, "the bylaws allow for historically inspired structures as long as they do not pose a safety hazard. This baby is ADA compliant, motion sensor enabled, and rated to hold 3 times the load of a standard driveway. Want to test it? She stomped off. That was only phase 1. Phase 2 was social.
I invited the whole block over for what I called the trench party. Free barbecue, cold drinks, and a demo of the Drawbridge going up and down. Kids loved it. Parents took selfies. I even let a few neighborhood teens ride their bikes across it. People laughed. They clapped. Someone said I should go viral. And right on cue, Karen appeared on her front porch with binoculars, steaming like a tea kettle. But the best part? The city inspector came by. Karen had called him, and after 30 minutes of walking around the trench with his clipboard, he gave me a thumbs up. "You're good," he said. "Actually, pretty genius." I smiled. Karen looked like she was going to faint. That night, she called an emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't invited, but several attendees filled me in later. Apparently, she tried to get my drawbridge labeled as a security risk. She even brought in a printed photo of it, annotated in red ink. But when someone asked if any bylaws were actually broken, all she could do was fume. The vote to leave me alone? Unanimous. I thought that was the end. I thought the war was won. But Karen wasn't finished. No, she had one more move. It came 3 days later, disguised as a friendly letter in a soft pink envelope, slipped into my mailbox without postage. Inside was a card, floral, embossed, fake cheerful. "Dear neighbor, due to your recent construction, the HOA has decided to reevaluate all property enhancements in our community. We will be conducting home inspections beginning this weekend. Please be available. Sincerely, your HOA President." I stared at the letter, then at my house. I knew what this was. Retaliation. She wanted to nitpick me into submission. She thought the war could still be won through attrition. But she didn't know the full scope of my plans. She didn't know that the drawbridge was just the beginning. She didn't know what was underneath. Because while she was worrying about flowers and cones and lawn symmetry, I'd been planning a basement expansion project of my own. Let's just say my garage wasn't just a garage anymore. And the next time Karen tried to step on my land, she'd trigger surprise so bold, so unexpected, it would finally trap her where she belonged, in her own mess. I call it the tunnel. While Karen was out measuring shrubs and reporting plastic flamingos, I was underground, literally, building what I like to call the HOA panic room, though it's really more of a subterranean command center. Reinforced concrete walls, independent power, Wi-Fi, and surveillance monitors streaming every inch of my property. It had a couch. It had a fridge. It had a button that controlled the drawbridge remotely. Yes, I built all of that. No, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to, because this wasn't just about escaping the HOA's wrath anymore. This was about anticipating it. When Karen dropped that card into my mailbox, the one about random inspections, I knew she was preparing her next strike. And when the first inspection officer showed up at 9 a.m. sharp that Saturday, wearing a visor and holding a clipboard, I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was that she brought backup. 2 other HOA board members arrived. Steve, the guy who tucks his shirt into gym shorts, and Denise, who once threatened to report me for repainting my porch outside seasonal palette. They stood on my stoop, cleared their throats, and asked to come in. "For what purpose?" I asked through the ring cam. "Routine compliance inspection," she said. She was in the background, fake smiling, clutching a manila folder like it held nuclear codes. "I'm busy," I said. "Unless this is an emergency, I'd ask you to leave." "We're authorized," she snapped. "Page 23, subsection B, line item 4, reasonable entry during announced inspections." I almost laughed. Yeah, announced being the key word. "You were notified," she said smugly. I hold the envelope up to the camera. "Karen, this isn't a candygram. Try again." She gritted her teeth. "Then we'll file a citation." I smiled. "Go ahead. But while you're at it, tell your people to stop trespassing."
I flipped the switch in my tunnel. The drawbridge lifted slowly, whining softly as the gears turned, rising up in front of their eyes like Excalibur itself. Karen and her minions stared in disbelief as the wooden platform ascended skyward, leaving a 6-foot-wide trench between them and my front door. "Have a nice day," I said, and disconnected the call. For a moment I thought that would be the end, but I should have known Karen better. Later that week, I received a formal cease and desist letter in a thick envelope, claiming that my drawbridge impeded emergency access, that it violated community aesthetic values, and that I was operating a mechanical hazard within a residential zone. Nice try. I responded with my own letter, attached with my city-issued permit, structural safety certificates, noise compliance tests, and a notarized declaration from a fire marshal confirming the bridge met all access codes when lowered, which it always is, unless Karen comes around. That's when she cracked. The next day, Karen marched up to my property with a uniformed officer. Yes, a real cop. She called the police. Unfortunately for her, so did I. You see, I'd gotten wind of her plan from one of my party guests, a neighbor who overheard Karen bragging to her sister-in-law about finally putting that trench freak in his place. So when she showed up with the officer, I had my body cam rolling from inside the drawbridge control room. And it was beautiful. "Sir, Miss Reynolds here says you're impeding access to the shared community easement and creating a public hazard." I handed him my documents. "Everything's permitted and up to code. You'll find my certifications from the city, the county, and the HOA's own architectural committee, which she chaired when I first submitted the design." Karen turned red. She'd forgotten she'd signed the original design approval when I slipped it in during the quarterly packet review. The officer read the documents, scratched his head, and looked up. "Ma'am, unless there's an active threat or code violation, this is a civil matter." Karen exploded. "He's building traps! He has tunnels! He's trying to intimidate the board!" "Tunnels?" asked the officer, raising an eyebrow. I smiled. "Ma'am, would you like to see my basement renovation permits, too?" The officer politely excused himself, clearly uninterested in being dragged into HOA vendettas. But that wasn't the end. No, Karen had one last act in her petty opera. She filed a lawsuit. Yes, she sued me. Claimed intentional psychological harassment, community intimidation, and, my personal favorite, abuse of engineering knowledge with malicious intent. I couldn't make the stuff up. Unfortunately for her, I came prepared. I countersued for harassment, defamation, and trespassing. I presented videos of her stepping onto my property uninvited, photos of her tampering with my mail, and copies of every fine, letter, and fabricated violation she ever issued. The courtroom was packed with neighbors. Not one testified in her favor. The judge took less than an hour. Case dismissed, countersuit upheld. Karen was ordered to pay damages and issue a formal letter of apology, which I had framed. It now hangs in my tunnel, under a spotlight. The HOA board voted to remove her 2 weeks later. She sold her house within the month. Her replacement? Steve, the tucked shirt guy. Turned out he hated her too. We're on good terms now. As for the trench, it's still there. The drawbridge, still operational. But the moat, I added koi, real ones. Kids from the block come feed them after school. Sometimes I stand there and watch the water ripple, leaning on the post of my drawbridge with a glass of iced tea in my hand. And when people ask me, "Why'd you go through all that trouble, all that digging, engineering, money?" I just smile and say, because when you try to trap a man on his own land, you better be sure he knows how to build walls, tunnels, and a few surprises. This isn't just a house anymore. It's a fortress, a symbol. And every time I hear the soft clunk of the drawbridge lowering, I remember the day the HOA tried to bury me in red tape. So I buried them instead, in code compliance, legal permits, and genius engineering. Call me petty, call me crazy, but no one blocks my driveway, not even Karen.